Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Muy buenas tardes. My name is Lily Pinedo Giangay. I am the program director of the SJSU Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center, and I am so thrilled to be sharing this space with so many of you this afternoon on a Friday. We're excited that it's the end of, well, it's the end of my work week. I know some folks still work on the weekends, but it's been quite a week. So just really excited that we could be here in community with one another and celebrate our Latinas and Libros authors. And this event is long overdue. We were scheduled to have this event back in spring of 2020. And then as you all know, the pandemic happened. And so we were forced to postpone this event. So I'm glad that we are all here and we're safe and healthy, and we could join in community to highlight the tremendous work of some of our local Latina authors. And so this is a collaboration between Centro and Modern Latina, and I am just ecstatic to welcome also Linda Castillo, who's the CEO, director, founder of Modern Latina. So Linda, I'd like to welcome you for some remarks as well.
Thank you, Lily, and the SJSU Chicanx Latinx Success Center for providing this space to have the Latinos in Libro event. I founded Modern Latina to celebrate, inspire, and empower Latina women, and to further support the literary works by Latinx authors and elevate our stories. I created the Modern Latina Book Club. As a proud SJSU graduate, I'm extremely honored to be here today to celebrate the contributions of Latinas in literature, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's moderators. Yesenia Guzman is a third-year business marketing major with a Chicanx Studies minor at SJSU. She currently mentors and cultivates meaningful relationships with other SJSU students as a student success leader at El Centro. She loves to read and free write in her journal, allowing her thoughts and creativity to flow onto paper. Admired by the power of literature, Yesenia is excited to meet and have a conversation with today's panel of Latina authors. Elisa Aquino is our second moderator. She received her bachelor degree in Latin American Latino Studies and Sociology from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 2017. She is originally from Los Angeles, California, with parents who migrated from the US from Oaxaca, Mexico, and is proudly indigenous from Zapotec community. Elisa serves as the program coordinator at the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center. Please join me in welcoming our moderators, Yesenia and Elisa. Thank you.
And Linda, just a quick change. So we don't have Yesenia here with us today, but we do have Ashley Guerrero as our moderator.
I am so sorry. My sincere apologies. So let me see if I can pull up Ashley's bio so I can quickly read her bio. Or Ashley, if you want, maybe it's just easier if you do a quick intro. Let me see if I don't, my sincere apologies.
It's okay, I can just do something really fast. My name is Ashley Guerrero, and I'm a third year here at San Jose State. I'm currently studying political science with a minor in legal studies. And I currently work as a student success leader with the Chicanx Latinx Resource Center. And I'm really passionate about social justice and advocacy work. So I actually recently won a position as Director of Intercultural Affairs for student government at San Jose State. So I'm super excited for where this is going to take me. And I'm super excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Ashley, and my apologies about that. And I can't wait to hear you guys have the conversation with these amazing Latina authors.
So at this time, we invite our authors to introduce themselves. So we will begin with Linda Gonzalez.
Thank you so much for having me here. And yes, a year we have been waiting for this event, and I'm so excited to be here. And I see a lot of my comadres are here as well. So thrilled that you're all with us today. One of the first questions is about who we are and why we write. So I will say that I am the daughter of immigrants, my mother from Colombia, my father from Mexico. I am the mother of 24-year-old twins, and I am sister to 5 siblings, 2 of which I grew up with in Los Angeles. I've lived for over 30 years in the Bay, and I currently reside in San Rafael, which is the unceded land of the coastal Miwok Nation. To support my writing life, I work as a life coach and a facilitative consultant with a racial equity lens. And my sport is tennis. I'm actually very excited because right now there is a Women's Tennis Association tournament that's happening, and there is a Mexicana who is in the doubles and still in the tournament, and a Colombiana who's in the singles. And to tell you what a rare and precious thing that is to say why we are here talking about Latinas in literature, another rare and precious thing.
Thank you so much, Linda. Glad to have you here with us this afternoon. We'll turn it over to Graciela.
Hi, so I'm going to kind of hit the highlights of the kind of crazy life that I've lived that relate to the literature that I'm writing today. So I like to introduce myself as the daughter of Mexican immigrants who found herself at UC Berkeley on an Air Force ROTC scholarship because of amazing mentorship I received in high school. And that led to a global decade of military aviation as an officer and aviator. And after visiting 27 countries and completing my master's degree in international business management, I decided to jump into tech. I was already in a technical role, so I decided to keep it going. And I worked in Silicon Valley as a marketing manager for Siemens, headquartered in Germany, and then later for an Israeli solar electronics, not the panels, but the electronics that connect the panels. So solar photovoltaic electronics, it's a mouthful. And that corporate marketing experience set me up beautifully to become an entrepreneur. And so when the layoffs happened in the summer of 2009, the big crisis back then, I decided, here's my moment. And so today I'm the founder of Gracefully Global Group. We're an educational publishing company headquartered in Hayward. And our mission is simply to showcase the positive contributions of Latinos in the USA. And I think the best way to summarize the variety of literature that you'll see is I'm a storyteller, teaching others to become epic storytellers of their value. And I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Grace, and we're excited to have you join us. And lastly, we have Marta Hernandez.
Gracias. Thank you for the invitation. I was born in Oakland, California, raised in Chavinda, Michoacán, Mexico. So the majority of my most precious formation years were in a small town that I love, and I can't wait to go back to every year. Came back to Oakland while I was in middle school, or the beginning of, and ended up in going to college in LA. So I have a lot of love for the LA community as well. Spent a ton working in the San Jose area because I led recruitment for Mi Pueblo food centers back in the day when it was growing and expanding. And that's where I developed a passion for human resources. And the idea that sparked my one of my companies now, which is Made Boss, Made by Own Self. We began with a software solution to support the career pathing development of employees, so they could see themselves in the companies that they work at and give them an individualized plan on how to get there. And now we've expanded to supporting those businesses in structuring HR processes that allow for that growth to happen. We have customers across the nation, nonprofit, for-profits, etc. Some Latinos, some not, led by Latino, but what they all have in common is this very special a goal of supporting career development for their employees. During the pandemic 2020, I started another business with two other partners, and that's ESO Ventures. We've already incubated over 40 entrepreneurs in East Oakland. We're introducing legislation, really excited about that, to support business ideas, those that do not have an actual way of growing and developing a business. So we're supporting with that. I'm a singer. I write music. Corridos are my forte. I love norteño banda. I sing mariachi. And I'm a boxing trainee. And that's me.
Muchas gracias, Marta. It's a pleasure to have you here join us this afternoon. And now I will turn it over to our moderators to begin the questions.
All right, thank you very much. It's such an honor to have you all with us today and to be here to share a little bit about yourselves. And to start off today's panel, I would like to ask you all the same question. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a writer. So maybe we can start with Linda. We'll just go down my Zoom screen.
Thank you so much. I love this question. You know, how did I become a writer? In many, many ways. One of them was to really acknowledge and accept that I had a gift. And often much of that came outside from people telling me. When I was younger, I used to write really, back in the day, we would write letters by hand and put them in an envelope with a stamp and mail them to people. And people would tell me, oh my God, you write wonderful letters. And so I got this enthusiasm for people. When my twins were born, there was a call to an anthology to talk about being a mom. I submitted an essay and it was accepted. And that really started me on the journey of really honoring my gift. It really helped me to join with some other Latina women who were also really wanting to get their writing going. So we would just meet, we would write for a while, and then at the end we would read what we wrote and we would just clap, because at that moment all we needed was the sense of, yes, this is so important and we want to be here for each other. Over the years, I had book groups, and I ultimately got my master's in fine arts in writing, insisting that the only Latina on faculty be my mentee and my mentor. And that, you know, I did that mostly because it's very hard to write in the world that we live in. There's so many things going on in our lives, and I knew that I needed structure and discipline and people who believed in what I wrote. And so I would say that that has always been my path, and it continues to be my path, to have some kind of structured discipline and people who believe in my writing and who give me honest, critical, loving feedback.
Yes, Linda, that was really great to hear. And something that really stood out to me was that you had a gift to share with others, and that, you had a community of people who believed in you. So that was really powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Graciela, if you have any responses to the question, I can repeat it again. If you can tell us about yourself and how you became a writer.
Yeah, and call me Graciela, please. That's my full name. Yeah, Grace was given to me by a kindergarten teacher who couldn't say Graciela, so I ended up adopting it, as many of us do. But I'm Graciela, so please go ahead and call me Graciela. So I was thinking about this question, and it's a very specific moment. I was 15 years old and I was selected for Girls State in high school, which is a Rotary Club, American Legion sponsored event where 2 girls from high schools are picked to gather in a place in the summer and pretend that you're running a state government. So it was a lesson in civics. It was city, county, and state government, and you ran for office and you ran for commissioner and you passed laws. You learn Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure. So it was like this little mini how to run stuff. It was the leadership training. And I did that, and I came back and I was so astounded by it that I basically sat down and wrote a letter to the editor of the local paper. Like, this thing exists and like not enough of us know about it, and that's literally the pattern of my life. Like, an amazing thing happened in my life and I got to be part of it. What a blessing. And I have to turn around and write it so that other people can know it exists and possibly consider also doing that. And this stack of books that we're going to talk about, what I've been doing, that's literally all it is. It's a collection of amazing things that have happened and then inspiring literature so that other people can go, wow, I had no idea, especially young women in our community. So that was the spark for me, is that very early moment. And I was selected to be a junior counselor, and I went back the following year to help run that organization. And it was such a profoundly important event. Um, I'll tell you more about the other, the specific literature later, but that's really where it starts. And that's literally the pattern of my life. And that also includes having a 1 pound, 2 ounce baby at 25 weeks, my first daughter, Milagro. When that happened, 18 months after I left the Air Force, the way my husband and I coped is we created a webpage, and then every day that we visited her, he's holding the baby, I'm holding the laptop, or vice versa. And we just wrote, like, what would she be thinking if she could talk? Hey, I'm out of the incubator for 3 hours today, So it became like a coping mechanism. And it was blogging before they called it blogging, right? And then that page ended up it was really because we were tired of people calling us. How's the baby? She's like, well, she almost died last night, So like, go to the website, Baby Milagro. And so it became a way of coping with some adversity, knowing that other people could just go read that, so we don't have to call everybody back. And then what we didn't know was going to happen is our nurses started sharing that link with NICU nurses all over the world, so that parents that also had hospitalized babies could see hope and have a journey ahead. So that's it. Something happened and I wrote about it. That's lather, rinse, repeat, and more details to come of what that looks like.
Thank you, Graciela. That really resonated, especially because you were using writing as a tool of coping with situations that you were going through. And that's so powerful because I have some students that I've been, checking in with throughout the semester, and they've also told me how they use journaling as a way for them to express their feelings and what they're going through. So, I think that just really highlighted the importance of just writing and sharing your story and noting what's happening in your life. So
even if you're the only one that sees it, because people say, oh, writing, it's a lost art, it's long form writing. I'm like, oh my God, I hope not, because what are you going to do, keep all that inside? Right? So let's not lose it. It's important to get it out, even if it's just for yourself.
Thank you for that. Sí, gracias. And Marta, if you can also share about yourself and how you became a writer.
Yeah, thank you. I think the writing happened when I started writing songs. And it was, I realized that when I felt really sad or really upset, I'm a very happy person, like my soul, people want to be around me. And so I felt I couldn't break down. So I always left those moments for myself. And I realized that when I was driving, when I was having those like deep moments, music came about, and I would immediately start recording whatever was coming out. And sometimes it would come out as a song, other times all over the place. And so it wasn't until I paid attention to that, to actually go back to all of these recordings and literally start writing the pieces, that I realized I had a gift. And it wasn't just a gift of, oh, let me think about this idea and write it down. No, it was like emotions out of my soul coming out, wanting the world to know that they were there. So that was sort of like the initial on me utilizing writing as a form of expression. Then I realized when I was raising capital for Made Boss, that I was doing something that very few people had been able to do, right? Raise capital as a Latina in tech without a tech background, without like pedigree. That was going to be tough. So I went into a non-traditional route, which at the time was being introduced. It was new legislation, which allowed people like you and me, people who are not necessarily traditional investors, and they don't have the credentials to invest. Sorry, maybe you are that person, so I'm going to take that back. In my ladder of inference, if you're a student, maybe you're not. So this new legislation allowed the general public to have access to investments of potential high growth companies, in this case, technology. So platforms like Republic and many others, calling a crowdsource, right? Crowdfunding from communities, but in a private sector. And so it's called a SAFE, so safe investment. And I learned about it and I'm like, oh my God, imagine I could raise $1 million from 1,000 Latinos if they all invested $100. Like, that's doable. I have a following from my singing and I have a lot of people know me. I thought I had it, sealed. It's a done deal. But it wasn't. I learned the hard lesson that it was easier for people to go and buy a purse for $500 than invest 100 on my company. That it was easier for people to spend $300 on a bottle on a one night out than invest $300 in my company. And it hit. So that was emotional. And a friend actually said to me, Marta, maybe it's because people don't know what your big vision about this tech in an enterprise you want to build. Like, why don't you tell people your story? So I started on Facebook just writing my mini novela in Spanish, mini novela. And I even called it the Nopalera CEO because I wanted to be a nopalera back when I was little, selling nopales in El Pueblo. And that's how it started. Little mini novela. Every Monday or Tuesday, I don't remember when it was, I would write the thing and like release it. And eventually a friend read that and said, oh my God, this needs to be a book. So I already had it written when he, brought it up to me, and it was just a translation thing. But it was emotion that drove the action.
That's really amazing to hear how, everything kind of started from a bad situation and you being advised by your friend to share your story, and from there it just blossomed into, now becoming or being, an author, and kind of seeing how that journey really expanded from something small and starting as the Nopalera CEO. I love the name, by the way. Gracias, Marta. And I will pass it on to Ashley, who will continue with a few more questions.
Thanks, Elisa. Okay, so my question is, what inspired you to write? And then tell us a bit about your written pieces. And so we'd like to invite you to share a piece of your writing with us. So I'll start off with Graciela.
Okay, so I love that Linda mentioned the anthology approach. This is really good for students to know. Sometimes the easiest way to be able to call yourself an author is to go into a project with other authors. Someone else is handling the editorial and the proofreading and the actual publication and the whole thing, and you just get to contribute one chapter. So I did that. The first time I was published it's called When I Was There, Life at Berkeley. So alumni group, 35 people got selected. I think 300 people submitted essays, and I submitted one called Inhaling the Stanford Tree, of a crazy night of a thing that we did. So this was the first time. It was just for fun, but it was like, hey, that was pretty cool. I just submitted something and they liked it. But the first time I wrote a book from purpose and everything that I described earlier was when I published Latinovating. And this is when I first met Linda. Latinovating, Green American Jobs and the Latinos Creating Them. And I envision this as a series. What it is, it's 10 case studies of highly educated Latinas and Latinos. 5 of them are women, 5 are men, very balanced, very different industries. And the commonality is they grew up with conservation, family values, like I'm sure a lot of us did. Reusing, vale más reusar que descartar, right? And then when that foundation was laid, then one day after getting their education and some professional experience in industries that were not so good with conservation, they launched their own businesses as if the planet matters. So this book took me years to put together because of the in-depth interviews that I do of people, family, their business, their industry, the background of, so what's so innovative in this space of energy storage? Well, I got to tell you what it looks like first before Frank Ramirez came along, right? And then there's recommendations for students. If you're really now like, oh my God, I want to know more about sustainable packaging, then Dennis Salazar in Chicago gives you some resources. So that was why I wrote that first book. And notice it had nothing to do with me. It was like, hey, let me talk about these other people, because see, I'm a journalist also. Like I've always published about other people and stories. And I didn't really, I wasn't thinking about my story at all. I was like so on. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship. Can I just tell you? So now I'm writing the next 10 case studies. I've got 2 more interviews to do, and they're just like really amazing stories. And so I get to speak to middle school students and high school students, and I get to be a guest lecturer at business schools. And then I have students that are Latinos come up to me at the business school, like at Texas State San Marcos. Oh my God, I'm a senior in business, and you're the first Latina I've ever seen in front of the classroom. So that question about cultural work, we'll come back to that. But that is why I wrote this book. Very quickly, I wrote the Captain Mama book series. Okay, remember I mentioned what I did in the Air Force? When have you ever seen a bilingual children's picture book in Inglés and Español where mama's flying the jet? It was time. I mean, I know that, a lot of books that we have, the little girls in the kitchen making tamales, tortillas, and chocolate con abuelita or mama. I have all those books, but come on. There's so much more, right? That's like stereotyping. That's like, publisher stereotyping what they think Latina authors write about. And I was like, no, she's flying the plane. And this is based on my career. And then this is the second one where they go out to the jet, Captain Mama Surprise, Sorpresa de Capitan Mama. And in about 3 weeks, you're going to see the art for the third book in the series. It's being developed right now. We just did a successful Kiva campaign to raise the funds to get that next book out because we got hammered during COVID. And those are all the reasons why. And those books get little kids in English and Spanish so excited about airplanes. And I'm like, how many of you ever been on an airplane? And so many hands don't go up. Because I was never on an airplane until I was halfway through ROTC at Berkeley, and I was at a pilot training base, and I got an orientation ride. Up until then, I'd never been on a plane, right? So I'm like, see, you can do this too. And so I get to come in there and really get kids excited about that. And I get to show up as a Latina veteran and as a mama and as a mujer in a career field where people think that veterans are dudes, right? Or the only time you hear of a Latina is when it's a tragedy. Right? So that's why I show up that way. That led me to be included in another anthology that was launched last year by Jackie Ruiz in Chicago, and it's called Latinas in Aviation. So she asked me to contribute. I got the first chapter because it's such a weird story, I guess. But this book is amazing. It's 22 Latinas all over the world who are in aviation roles, from pilots to veterans to mechanics, marketing managers for major airlines. And then lastly, this is near and dear. This is my new book, Brand Before Your Resume. And yep, I finally had to put myself on the cover. People forced me into it because they're like, it's a book on personal branding. You gotta do this. But this is how I show up to do the very hard work to convince military veterans that they have amazing value left for the next chapter of their life, if only they knew how to communicate that value from a marketing mindset that I can bring as a veteran and marketing professional. So this is the first marketing guidebook written by a veteran for military vets and spouses and transitioning military that uniquely features 28 personal branding examples written by veterans that I personally coached. So it's just filled with the process and the inspiration. So do you see that every single book has a very different audience and a very specific purpose? And I want people to, I'm not giving away any fishes is what I like to say. Here's how to fish. And that's what the books do, is they teach you the how. So that is a little insight. I'm not going to have time to read from all the books. Maybe that's another moment for that. But I wanted you to see that, one of the problems with saying that you're a Latina author is that people think you write about a certain type of stuff, right? That people want to box you in because it's easier for them to understand. I'm like, I write about entrepreneurship, aviation, military service, branding, and who knows what's coming next, So that's the reason why I intentionally do the variety. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I think I did. Every single book that I've written, I've pitched to traditional publishers, and everybody wants it. But I own the publishing company that ultimately publishes everything, because I don't want to ask some guy in New York for permission to have the Air Force Band record a song for my children's book, which, by the way, that's going to get announced next week. Air Force Band has written a book, a complete song, like a soundtrack to Goodnight Captain Mama, like the Air Force Band. Okay. So but I didn't have to ask anybody for permission to do it. I just granted permission to the Air Force, and then they had me come in and read the book in Spanish and record the song. So I can't wait to see it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I've actually never, me myself have read like a bilingual like book. So I think it's awesome that you are, you're creating that content for like our people, for like our kids and stuff, especially since you are a veteran. And I think that's really awesome because like you said, you don't really ever see like Latina veterans, like especially Latina veteran authors. So I'm gonna ask the same question to Linda. So the question was, what inspired you to write? And then tell us a bit about your written pieces. And if you'd like to share a little bit piece of your writing with us, that'd be nice.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I do. I love the idea of really breaking through the idea that we do one thing or one story. One of the things that I really believe in is that there is the danger of the single story about any group of people, and that everything that we write about is about breaking through the stereotypes that people have, particularly about Latinas, for sure. And so I was to talk about a couple of things. My first book was The Cost of Our Lives, and it is a family memoir. I wrote it because I wanted to end the legacy of secrets in my family, give my children's generation a cleaner slate to live their lives and to connect with each other, and also to heal the pain from my particular generation, because it's a story of my father's two families. And so I'm going to read a little bit about that, then talk about a couple of other books. So this is when I have, for the first time, met my two sisters in Mexico. And I'm about to leave the country from our trip. The next morning came too soon. We entered the hustle of the airport, caught in the surge of people and jumble of emotions airports create. After checking in, we sat in the cafe near the gate and drank a final cafecito together. Ariety commented on my last name, Gonzalez, thinking it was strange that Americanos used their maternal family's name. I think mi papá dropped Manrique as an attempt to cover his tracks, so his niños couldn't find him, I said. Reaching out, I put my hand on hers. I'm glad his plan didn't work. Soon my flight was announced. I gathered my backpack and started toward the gate. Ariety handed me a piece of paper. We hugged, and then I turned to hug my hermanas, flooded with the grief of what we had missed, of the wounds still tender to the touch, of those yet unexposed, because trust takes time and courage. I couldn't speak, only looked at them each with a glimmer of joy in my eyes that found the same in theirs. I hugged Miguel, who was staying for another week, and whispered, Gracias. On the plane, I fished around in my backpack for my journal and tissue as tears came. Poco a poco, I told myself, I was glad the next generation wouldn't carry our secrets. My fingers touched the squares and circles that were real people now. There were my 3 nephews who I met briefly, and the 2 nieces who had welcomed me from the beginning. Manrique was my shadow name, the name that carried my father's secret. I opened Ariety's card and took in her attempt to write in English. Auntie, I hope you've been as happy as I was with you here. I want to thank you for your love and tenderness to us. We want you to know how much we love you and miss you. I want you to leave with a big smile and with many wishes to come back. Please send our love to the family there and tell them we are expecting them. And above all this, thank you for your help. I hope the love grows fast and lasts forever. Remember to tell Theo and Gina how much we love them. Ariety. That was a promise I could keep. Closing my eyes, I sat in a fragile hope that enveloped me like a silk rebozo, so fine it could slide through a wedding band. My second book, which I published this year, is called Breaking Through Your Own Glass Ceiling. And I wrote it because I've been a life coach for over 25 years, and mostly for women of color, and within that, mostly Latinas. And I saw that there was a lot of similar issues that were coming up for everybody. And I thought this is a way to share my wisdom and their wisdom, because their stories are in the book as well. And also to interrupt the message that most, I call them one size fits all motivational books give, that don't talk about that, yeah, vision boards are great, and I believe in mantras. However, that's not going to stop the daily structural inequities that we have to deal with every day of our lives. So I'm just going to read a very short piece from this book as well in the introduction. Breaking through your own glass ceiling is critical internal work to be able to challenge external systematic barriers. No matter how educated or professionally accomplished you may be, your race, your gender, and other factors will present obstacles to your success, both in and outside the workplace. Why does this matter? These inequities lead to higher rates of depression, ill health, and lower pay rates for women and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because the status quo is not set up for our success. White women still only earn 77 cents for every dollar the average white man earns. African American women, 71 cents, and Latinas, 66 cents. There are multiple reasons for this, including occupational segregation, where women are steered towards professions that pay less. Even though women earn higher grades than men, 1 year after graduating from college, women with a computer science degree, a high earning field, are earning 77 cents for each dollar earned by their male classmates. While it is important to fight for laws and policies that eliminate discrimination, it is equally important to do the internal work, because that is where we have agency. Because of this relentless inequity, you likely have thoughts and behaviors that discount you and those you love. Spoiler alert, it is not because you are bad or weak. I work with clients to leave toxic situations with power and grace, and to prioritize relationships, work, and prosperity that supports their long-term success. I also want to give a shout out, as people talked about anthologies and many other ways that I have been published, that there is a wonderful woman, Patricia Perez, on the call, who has been one of those people who have supported and loved up my work. And she got together an anthology called Rising Up, which is a collection of 15, and she's holding it up there. Look for Patricia Perez. It's a collection of 15 inspiring and culturally relevant stories by a diverse group of Latinx for young adults trying to find their place and understand their value in society. And I actually think it's great for people of any ages, because as Graciela and Marta have pointed out, there is so often that we don't see the role models, and we don't see that there are so many things that we can do. And I loved, just also want to give a shout out to Marta about the whole issue of economics and money. I have a whole section here on use money as energy and know your own prosperity, because I do find that that is one of the biggest glass ceilings that Latinas particularly have about, we have an idea of what we can earn and who we can be. So I love all of our work. Graciela, the same, just, showing the diversity of all we can do.
Thanks, Linda, for sharing a piece of your work. I found it really, like, the imagery that you gave off when you were like reading it, like, it reminded me of when I went to the Guadalajara airport, and my grandparents would be picking me up, and there was a little Starbucks right there, and I still remember, like, very vividly, like, when I was younger going there. So it just brought back a lot of memories. And also, like, the book on breaking the glass ceiling, I don't often read a lot about that kind of stuff, so you got me really interested in that. But yeah, so I'm gonna pass on the same question to Martha now. So what inspired you to write, and then tell us a little bit about your written pieces, and if you'd like to share a piece of your writing with us.
Thank you. So I briefly spoke about that on the previous question, right? Emotion is what really inspired me to write. Why I wrote I Have What It Takes. The book itself is not called De Nopalera a CEO, but this is a collection, just like both Linda and actually in this case, Graciela mentioned how she got introduced to writing is several of us, several Latinas who are actually telling our stories. And when we're thinking about the name, I thought, it's not you have what it takes. Like I shouldn't tell you who's seeing the book that you have what it takes. Like I want you to say it. When you read it, I want you to say it. I have what it takes, right? So that it becomes a personal, authentic, and very intimate feeling. So the chapters is where you'll see from Nopalera to CEO, and mine is the first chapter. So I'm going to read a little bit about my story. Would you like to buy nopales? That was my phrase when I was 6 years old. I was a businesswoman, even when my bucket of nopales in hand, shouting outside my house. 3 knocks, ta, ta, ta. A shout, would you like to buy nopales? ¿Quiere comprar nopales? 8,000 laughs that echoed in the corridor directly from the kitchen. My mother, my aunts, with tears in their eyes, almost dead with laughter. They would open the door and they'll have me repeat it over and over. That sells delivery, and fine-tune it until it was bulletproof, at least for a 6-year-old. They innocently encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit. After selling nopales, I leveled up to sell mangarinas, tangerines outside my house. Then we started selling chickens. I even had a stage where I tapped into my inner artist and made bows for little girls. I, without shame, sold them at family parties. I showed up with my little boxes. It was my joy to help my mother, since my father, who worked in the fields of Salinas, California, and Yuma, Arizona, mysteriously disappeared one day and stopped sending us money. My world changed when I heard my mom secretly tell a family member that I was born in the US. I immediately asked questions, but the only thing I could get out of them was, silly, don't tell anyone because the Americans are going to take you. Confused, I remember that I didn't know whether to feel distressed or liberated. I loved my life in my little town, Chavinda, but I also wanted to go to El Norte. In my town, almost everyone that I knew aspired to go to the United States. When my mom finally decided to return to the United States, I was super excited, and I didn't understand why my aunts who were left behind cried sadly, watching the van in which we were going to disappear. The 3-day trip quickly turned into more than a week. The van where we were traveling broke down halfway there, and we had to leave it behind. I remember we took out a few things from the van that we brought and finished the journey to the border by bus. I crossed the border with an uncle while my mom and my sisters risked their lives through the desert. The danger they faced never crossed my mind. My uncle, who I barely knew, and I, once in American soil, waited at a McDonald's for many hours until my family, and until finally a relative I had never seen before came to pick us up. I was 9 years old, and yet I didn't cry or ask any questions. I just waited. So telling this story and why I start this way is because when I came to the US, and even now as a professional, I felt like I had to be Latina. I was too Mexican. I had to listen to salsa. I couldn't listen to, at the time, Los Tucanes, La Chona, and all that stuff that we liked growing up. And I always wondered why, but doing research and really understanding the history behind like why there was this push to be more Latina than Mexicana, it became such an incredible force when I knew the numbers, right? That almost 70% of Latinos in the US are of Mexican descent. And there's a disparity between the very Mexican ones, right? Like if you like this kind of thing versus the ones who don't. And that was, for me, painful because I didn't see myself represented. So writing about my pride, my background, who I am, doesn't make me less in a professional setting. It just makes me proud of who I am.
Thank you for sharing that. That reminds me like a lot of like the stories that my parents would tell me. And like, I feel like they often carry a lot of shame in those stories. And I feel like it's really important that, you know, you like share it and, you know, you're proud about it. You're not like hiding it and, you know, highlighting it in your story, I think was like really like empowering. So thanks for sharing that with us. And then I'm going to pass it on to Elisa for the next question.
Gracias, Ashley. And the next question will be towards Linda. And the question is, what purpose do you hope your writing serves? And if you agree that writing is something that performs, and I quote, cultural work, what work do you hope your writing is doing?
Yes, I do think it's cultural work. I think particularly for women of color, for sure, and people of color, right? And anybody, because the thing is that we get attached, the word cultural gets attached to us, and ethnic. And actually, everybody in the world has a culture and has an ethnicity. It's just that white is seen as the norm and doesn't have to be talked about. So I just want to just break through that whole idea. And it is cultural work in the way that the world we live in does not really see and value both us culturally and the diversity of our culture. And I hope you're seeing that with the three of us for sure. Like that we're really different and we have different experiences, and that it's not about better than or less than. It's about let's expand the notion of what it means to be alive. And if I want to talk about what my purpose is, I would say it is really, it's interesting. I was having a coaching conversation today with a Latina, and, you know, we talked about how the message that we got and about pretending everything is fine, like how much we have been raised and acculturated to take care of everybody else first, and forgetting that we have to take care of ourselves first. And that is what gives us the capacity and the abundance and to give from joy rather than from bitterness to others. And so I think that I really, my goal is to liberate others from that. I mean, in my memoir, I am liberating my family from the idea that everything's fine. There's no problem with all this messy secret thing. You know, no, actually, it's not fine. It's very harmful and we need to, let's do something about it. Right. And then for breaking through your own glass ceiling, it's about, you know what? We can try as hard as we want, but there are, you know, real inequities and things are not fine. And we need to be honor that and not think it's our fault that we have not tried hard enough. We try really hard. That is never our problem. And then, you know, the final thing is really about how do you speak the truth while taking into account, you know, comunidad, right? People worried about that, my memoir that, oh, you're fulfilling the stereotype of Latino men. And I said, that's a stereotype of men, okay? When I did my research, I found it was across the board. People from all cultures told me, yeah, we got that story too. So just liberating the stereotypes that people have of ourselves and our communities for sure.
Thank you, Linda. And you know, something that you mentioned was that a lot of your writing is really to liberate others through, you know, your thought process and experiences, and that we have to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of others. And I think that's even more exceptional now during, you know, COVID and a lot of the racial, you know, issues going around, and there's just so much going on and different experiences that, you know, we're all going through, and that is even more important now than ever of what you said of taking care of ourselves first before, you know, we can continue doing the work that of liberating others as well. So it's very poignant. Thank you. And sorry, I will pass it on to Ashley now.
Thanks, Elisa. Okay, so this question is going to be for Martha, and the question is, what do you think makes a good story and or writing?
Well, I kept saying to people when when I would get asked to go sing, that I would, I'm not a singer, but I love singing. And similarly to the writing piece, like even when I got invited to be a part of this panel, I'm like, but I'm not a writer. And then I had to catch myself, but I just freaking wrote something, right? So it's that mentality that, again, Linda, you just spoke about that, and positioning ourselves in our power and really owning the thing we just did. So I think what makes good writing is not whether or not you have the title of a writer, is why you're writing it, is being authentic about your feelings, is intentional, right? So for me, why I wrote it is because I want every single little girl, young woman, to feel represented and know that if I did, with all the adversities and challenges that I've had in my life, that you should go for a bigger dream than I am going for, right? So that is where my intentionality comes into play. But it's also about not being perfect, because sometimes, like, I see people on social media and I'm like, dang, they're like, amazing, and life happens. So I kept hearing from friends and family, Marta está flaca, Marta is skinny, she's just so lucky, like she has the good genes. Well, what you don't see is me hustling every day, every hour, right, on my workouts, doing things I don't like to do. I don't like to do burpees, but I do them because they give me a nice, they give me nice abs. So when I think about the intentionality of writing this book, right, and good writing is, can I inspire people to do the thing, to take action, to start their plan, to focus on a big vision, to know that they can? Again, there's a lot of obstacles, a lot of challenges, but can we maneuver? Can you find somebody to help you do this thing? Can you start asking for help? So I show all the ugliness on what has led me to be where I'm at. I write about struggling with anxiety. I write about my panic attacks. I write about my divorce. I write about being a single mom, having to move because I couldn't support my family, and leaving my own home in Oakland to live in the Centro Valley in Modesto just with my son by ourselves. I write about those things. I write about not having money, not having electricity for 2 weeks, and knowing that my family could help me, but I was too proud to ask. I read about a freaking intuition I had. My car was getting depoted or repoed, and I was gonna start a job and I didn't have a car, and thinking, God, if I could win a car. And guess what? I fucking won a car, a truck, new, the week after. I read about those things because they happen with true intention. And it's not necessarily being lucky, it's not giving up.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. When you said that about the truck, I was like, oh my gosh, what? But I was just gonna add, I think a lot of the times, like me and other people, like we question our ability to write and whether our writing is good or not. And I think you pointed out something really that I sometimes forget, like, is the writing fulfilling like its purpose and intention? So I think that's something I will like definitely remember now in the future, because I definitely always doubt like my own writing and my ability. So thanks for sharing that with us. And I'll pass it out now to Elisa.
So the next question is going to be for Graciela. And the question is, why is it important to have Latina authors in the literary space?
Ooh, that is a loaded question. I love this question. I so often say, and I think I responded to somebody on LinkedIn this morning, when I saw a graduate, a Latina who just graduated with her aerospace engineering degree, and NASA just hired her, and she happens to be beautiful, and she was celebrating this, and like all these guys come in and they can't handle it because like, no, you don't really have a degree, and like you see that stuff, right? And I responded something like, I'm so sorry that her story has smashed your stereotype of who you think Latinas are, because that's what's going on, right? Like she just showed up as this beautiful woman with an aerospace engineering degree, and he doesn't have one. so, I love having a reaction. I love like provocatively showing up with literature and imagery that just shatters people's minds. They're like, what just happened, right? So I think that's why it's important that we show up as who we are, as this diverse community that we are. I mean, my God, like what ethnic community is more diverse than us? It's us. But yet so many people in mainstream, publishing and everything else, they just want to put you in a little bucket, right? I actually had somebody say to me, okay, let's look at this title again, Latinovating, Green American Jobs and Latinos Creating Them. I trademarked Latinovating. It came to me and I was running around a lake one day. I'm like, what is the word that I can make that's innovating, inspired by your culture with all of these diverse values, but you're innovating. The root word is not Latino, it's Latinovating, it's innovating. And then I put the LAT in front of it, right? And so it's important because when I was pitching that, I literally had an editor in San Francisco at a publishing firm whose motto is building a world that works for all of us. He literally wrote back to me. He says, I don't understand why you, a Latina, are writing about sustainability and these entrepreneurship studies. Don't you guys just write about immigration? I mean, this is literally what he said to me in an email. Like my mind can't compute that you're writing about entrepreneurship and sustainability and innovation. What? And so I'm like, ha ha ha, you don't get it, right? So this is why it's important, right? And I wanted to just, I didn't read earlier, but I want to just read one thing to answer the cultural question. Okay. I write a chapter in Latinovating about Humberto. Okay. And Humberto grew up in the Central Valley in a bracero camp. His father was a bracero. So one of my favorite things, he applied to college and he didn't tell his dad he was applying to college because, that's such a selfish thing to do, was the thinking, like, where's the money going to come from? So his counselor said, you know what, you need to apply to college. You got a 3.7 GPA. And you can use my home address to receive your letters, and then we can tell your parents. I mean, it's like this back channel, this awesome mentor. So he got into lots of schools and he chose UC Davis. And there's this part of the story that Humberto told me, but I want to show just this one paragraph. When he's driving with his father in the Central Valley from Imperial Valley in the south up to Davis through the Central Valley, Highway 99. And so this is what I wrote. Humberto remembers the trip north with his father. We drove up to Davis in my 1939 rebuilt coupe. Humberto reflects fondly. We took a 14-hour road trip. That car did not go very fast. We had never done anything like that before, a father-son road trip. On the road, Uliterio, his father, reminisced about the different places he had worked as a bracero. He reflected on the different fields, the different farms, where he had worked and the type of produce that he had harvested during his working adult life. He appreciated that his son would never know that life of hard labor. After Humberto showed his father at the college campus, Uliterio took a Greyhound bus home. So imagine driving and having your papi go, oh, sí, me acuerdo el año de las fresas o los pepinos. Or, you're like reliving the harvest as you're driving your kid to college. And that's just a little part of Humberto's story, where he went on to get, a material science degree, an engineering degree. He went to Stanford on a full ride paid by IBM. And so, these stories. And so it's important for us to show up and tell those stories. Humberto's never going to get around to writing a book. He's just not. That's not who he is. So show up and tell the stories of our community, and then a collective, right? That's why it's important. And the same, that what I want to tell you about showing up is I did a writing workshop in Colorado, where it was a gifted and talented program in Windsor, Colorado at a middle school. And it was 100 students, and they bought copies of Latinovating for all the students, of which maybe 7 were Latinos, because the teacher had an idea that everybody in the gifted and talented program should learn much more about the Latino community than they already knew growing up in a small town in Colorado, which, by the way, that's where I grew up. So I was so happy to go back and do this workshop. And the thing I will never forget, the cultural work, this is like another spin on cultural work, is before we started the writing workshop, I asked, what did you guys like the most about reading the book? Was there a chapter that spoke to you, or a career, profession, and industry that intrigued you? What did you like? And I'll never forget, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy raises his hand, and he says, I had no idea that there were Latinos like that around. But I learned this reading your book. I said, what do you mean Latinos like that? He says, well, Latinos that are engineers and attorneys and venture capitalists. And he starts listing some of the things that he learned. He says, because around here, Latinos that I see are, cutting the grass or selling tacos at the taco truck, or, he described his, daily interaction with Latinos in his community. And I said, that is so fascinating. Like, that he just like had his eyes open that like Latinos are everywhere and they have businesses. And I said to him, well, you know what, next time you see the guy cutting the grass, maybe talk to him, because he might be the business owner, or maybe his brother owns it, because he's probably an entrepreneur. Right. And so that work, I think, is so important, that we show up not only in literature, but then we go out in front of mainstream audiences. This has been my focus since day one. It's why I decided to become the publisher versus having a publisher put me where they think I should be, right? So showing up in the mainstream spaces with our stories so that we can be seen for all the reasons that you've heard of why we write today, as business people, as people writing memoirs, as coaches, as all the things that we are, but that's not what people think we are, because they're getting different messaging, right? So that's I think the most important reason why we should be in literary spaces, is to just keep kind of opening people's eyes. And of course, I want to tell you one more thing. When I did the very first assembly for the children's book series, when we first released this one, I went to a school for Veterans Day, and it was a Title I school. The African-American counselor, friend of mine who invited me, said, 78% of the students are English language learners. They're Spanish-speaking kids. I said, cool, I'll do the whole assembly in Spanish. He goes, well, I don't know if the teachers are going to like that. And I said, well, we'll see when we get there, right? So Veterans Day assembly, I'm the speaker. I got the whole school in front of me, and I'm projecting all the images on the projector. And I asked the kids, in Spanish and in English, do you want the presentation in English? Some hands go up, all the teachers' hands go up. How many want it in Spanish? All the kids' hands go up. I'm like, okay, today we're going to do the presentation in Espanol. And I went right into reading the story. And what happened at the end of that, it was my very first event. The very first time after launch of the children's book. It's a story that I tell all the time, because I still cannot believe it happened. It's like one of those moments. It's like winning the truck. Okay. So as the little kids are filing out, the kindergartners are in the front row. This little girl in the front, she like pulls my sleeve and she stops. All the kids run into her because they're all filing out. And she pulls on my sleeve and she says, Capitana Mamá, yo también quiero volar aviones como tú. And that hit me so hard. I mean, like, my God, like I can still feel that chill of, whoa, after all those years of creating this book, that's it. This 5-year-old girl wants to fly airplanes, and she's seeing it as something that she can do. And I just grabbed her little hand. I came down, I looked at her and I said, you're going to learn all the English, Spanish, reading, math, science, everything to fly airplanes, or anything else you want to do. And don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't. Because my fear for her that moment when I heard that was, what would my mother have said, my mother from Mexico have said, if I'd gone home at age 5 and told her I wanted to fly airplanes? Estás loca, right? And so I was like, God, I hope you can hold on to that. So that is why we have to show up for our communities and in mainstream spaces and in books and speaking about it and all of it. So I've got answers for each and every book, but I'm going to keep it to those two.
That was so powerful, Graciela. And, from everything that you shared, I think what really resonated with me was the importance of provocatively showing up, as you had mentioned, and showing up as you are and who you are and our community, and writing about ourselves and our community. Because, as you had shared your experience of someone, not understanding the Latinx community and experiences, when you're writing potentially, you're going to touch other people, future generations of BIPOC folks, other women of color. and maybe even educate, those,
One of the first comments I got when we launched the children's book was on Facebook from a woman in Iowa who said, "I'm so happy to see that you're writing books about your service. Thank you for your service. But why are you using Spanish? Why are you trying to appeal to the illegals?" So, right. So that's it. It's like this whole intersection of who I am. But in her little small mind, I should just be this one thing. And adding this other part of my identity or the language, it just like blew her mind. And and I love that, it gives me a chance to answer respectfully, and educate. But not everybody loves that. I do. It's like, I just want to keep showing up and smashing stereotypes. So.
Thank you for all of your leadership of writing stories that need to be told. And it sounds like, you get a lot of comments and probably things that we don't often hear about, and probably go through those negative comments.
Yeah.
But, we appreciate all of your leadership and, dismantling and writing our own narratives.
Yeah, thank you.
And I will pass it to Ashley, who will be asking another question.
Thank you, Elisa. And so this question is for Linda. So what was your writing process like, and how long did it take you to write your book or other published pieces?
So long. I remember when I saw several, I think it was Sandra Cisneros, who had like a 10-year gap before she wrote her last. And I was like, oh, I love that. I love that. So the Cost of Our Lives was about 13 years. And there were I thought it was done at one point, and then I hired a Latina editorial consultant. She said, this is a good book. She goes, but there's a better book. And having read some Latina memoirs that I thought were not that well written, I took on the challenge to say, no, I want this to be the best it can be. And so I had to I went through 3 or 4 different structures. So that was a 13-year process. And this book was around 10 years too. One thing I have to shout out, it also helped me, role models mean everything, because there is a way where we tend to internalize and personalize and think it's just us. And even though I wrote the book all about it's not just us, it doesn't mean that doesn't come into my head, right? It's a daily process. So this book took about 10 years too, but it was all mixed together, because I remember reading that Jane Austen was writing 3 or 4 books at a time. And that has been me forever. I've always been writing 3 or 4 books at a time. And it just gave me the piece of, okay, if Jane Austen can do it, I can do it too. And because we're not linear people, we don't think that way. Something comes up and we're like, oh, I got to grab that, And so that is, that's the short and the long answer. And was there another part to the question about what was my writing process like? So I know that there are people who tell you, I write every day from 10 to 12, or I write blah, blah, blah. That is so not me. It is all very hit and miss. I do put across some time. And like I said, I had to create structures. There was no way without responsibility and commitment and accountability that people were like, okay, we're expecting your chapter next week because we're going to workshop it. All of that is what forced me to write, knowing I was getting together. I used to host writing workshops, writing days at my home for women of color. And that again was I loved it, but it was a forced process to make sure that I would write. And even today, I have writing buddies, people that I just will get together, even with Zoom, and we'll be on our Zoom, but we'll be writing. I have found that we live full, complicated lives, and that I require accountability. It's like Martha with the workouts, I pay someone to work me out this morning. I pay somebody tomorrow for my tennis clinic, it doesn't happen because I'm disciplined. Like there's this idea of who's disciplined and who's not. It is about the structures and the processes to make us do what we want to do in our lives. And so for the writing, it has been more like, how do I create structures in my life and accountability to make sure that I do my writing? Right now, my writing process is there's a meetup called Shut Up and Write that I do. I happen to do the one on Thursdays. That's Marin. And And it's, it's an hour and a half. We say hi for 15 minutes. We shut up and write for an hour. And then we come back for 15 minutes and talk about what happened. And my other structure is I found this wonderful BIPOC writing group on Monday evenings. And that is just a joy and a pleasure. And again, I did it because I was not writing. I mean, I was editing, I was marketing, I was doing, the life of a writer. I tell people you start out 90% writing, right, Graciela? And then the writing gets less and less and less because then you're editing, then you're looking for publishers, or you're publishing your own book, or you're marketing, or you're doing everything else that is, or you're doing wonderful presentations like this, right? Like the life of the writer, you start out writing, and then to keep writing is a challenge. And so it is really about creating accountability structures.
Well, and also, Linda, that's a very important point, because some people think you're just going to write and like somehow automatically the book's going to get out in the world. And let me just tell you right now, that's not at all how it happens, especially not if you get published by somebody else. They're going to give you attention for this much time, and then that's it. They're going on to the next project. And if you ever want sales, it's on you, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that's
Yeah.
why I decided
You have
own
to.
the business.
You are the I always say, I'm the creative director and I am the CFO. I always have to say I have a artist in resident, which is me. And now I have to go out and earn the money to make time for me to write. So it is, it is a very, you have to really be dedicated. And that's why the accountability works, because it's so much of a grind and nobody sees that. They see the book and they're like, woo. And you're like, yeah, woo. You want to see my $29 royalty check?
Exactly. Bulk orders. Yeah. No, that's such an important point. Such an important point.
Thanks, Linda, for sharing. I definitely agree that accountability is something that's really important, especially like as a college student. For me, when it comes down to writing essays or stuff like that, I always need like a deadline to really help hold me accountable. And I think you brought up a really good point. And like, going to like those community events, or like doing it with other people, so you're not like doing it alone. So thanks for sharing that with us. And I'll pass it over to Elisa again for another question.
Right on. So this question is for Marta. And what books have been most influential in your life?
So growing up, I spent most of my high school and early college years learning English, and I don't remember anything that I read. I remember House on Mango Street. I don't remember the story. I remember reading it. I don't remember the story. I do remember the process though. And the process was asking people what exactly was it that we were reading. So for me, the relationship that I have with reading is painful. Because in Spanish, I didn't go to school in Mexico. I was in elementary, so it wasn't until college that I actually learned to really read in Spanish on a professional level. My minor was in Spanish, and then in English, I decided for a sociology degree, and we read a lot of theory. I think it's until now that I'm starting to comprehend. I mean, how freaking mind-blowing is that, right? So when I tell you about books that were significant, it hasn't been a book. It's been research that I've done. It's been data that I've had to like Google. It's been how-tos. It's little pieces of writing that over time I've had to seek so that I could make progress. But it's until now that I've started to really think about what my relationship with books should be. So last year, I started with my commitment. I'm gonna read 5 books a year. That was my commitment, right? Every CEO reads this many books, and I'm like, hijo de la chingada, but maybe I'm not a CEO because I'm not reading that many books. So, I had to again think about who I am in my space, given my history and my relationship to books. It was painful. So I started reading mostly related in the business sector. There's one a particular one that it helped me get through a very difficult stage in my business, and that's your 5 next moves. So I read it in one plane ride from Mexico to Oakland, from Guadalajara to Oakland, and I couldn't believe that I had done that so fast, because I'd never done one book. I mean, literally it was my relationship with books. So I'm like, oh, I can do this. So then I upped my game. Maybe it's not 5 books. I'm gonna do 10. So I gave myself that commitment. So yeah, your next 5 moves is a book that really changed my perspective and how I want to drive my life in relation to my businesses and also my learning, because I saw reading, particularly books, as a painful process, and I didn't have time to read stories. Right? Like I'm like, my life is already adventurous enough. Like, why am I gonna read about other adventures? Like I can just tell you. But it really triggered this new way of learning for me.
Thank you for sharing, Marta. And you really highlighted an experience that I've also heard from other students of, their memories of reading also being painful. And I think, sometimes when English isn't your first language and you're forced to read something and, just your comprehension isn't there when, there's language barriers. And, I've heard that and had that conversation with students at the Centro, even in college, and, them struggling with reading, or when something, it doesn't feel like you can connect to it, or it feels very esoteric. And so thank you for sharing, Marta. And Ashley will ask the last question.
Thank you. So in 1 minute, so we can move on to the Q&A, please share with us what's next for you. What are you working on now? And I'll invite Martha to start, followed by Linda, and we'll end with with Graciela.
Thank you. So I wrote my first bachata song, which will be released soon. Really excited about that. I've always done, I started venturing into salsa, and now it's a bachata song. I haven't done mariachi, so I'm really excited about writing a mariachi song. That's my next move. In relation to business, really continuing to grow Made Boss and ESO Ventures, supporting entrepreneurs and their growth. I also think that we have some connections that we need to make. Like I'm like, Linda, I'm gonna call you, Graciela, like expect an email from me, and all of you, obviously, in the way that we can show up for each other and support our work. So that's something that I'm starting to do. The other thing that's becoming pretty freaking cool is that as a tech founder, right, I'm in AI and all that stuff, I'm also I'm getting invited to speak at different colleges and universities. So I'm selling the whole package. So forget buying this on Amazon. The whole package is I come and speak for an hour, I close the event with Norteño Banda singing, and I'll do a workshop for the parents on how to support growth and development or even entrepreneurship. So hey, we got this. That's the big
my
next
God,
move.
we are so similar. We are going to talk. Okay. It's not about a book. It's about an experience and like what we're going to leave you thinking about after we leave. And that's the commonality of what we're doing here. Yeah. Bravo, Martha.
Okay, then Linda, you can share.
Yes, so many. As I said, I'm always writing a lot of books, so I have a couple more in the pipeline. One is called Mothering is Legacy, which is really thinking about, as I raised my twins, what were those underlying things that I really wanted them to understand and learn and be in the world, like those deep values that guided a lot of that. I have another one called Present Moment Essays, which are essays I've written over the years, a number of which have been published in journals, and really about, how do you stay present in the moment in spite of everything. And then the other thing is I just this week launched an online course for this book. I'm so excited. So you'll get the information if you go to the first page of my website, lindagonzalez.net. It has a book. It has a discount coupon for the first 30 people 20% off. And if for whatever reason they're out, you can get a hold of me and send me a note, and I'd be happy to anyone who's on this call, make sure everyone who wants it gets it. And it's something great for you, but it could be great for somebody in your life that you know as well. Oh, and solo performance, that's there. I know I'm definitely ultimately a performer, but you gotta time this stuff out, and you gotta make some choices.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Graciela.
Well, we launched Brand Before Your Resume November 6th, and I had this, still have it right here. I have a visual marketing plan of like the top 10 circles, the most important things I'm going to do to launch this book. It's just, simplify the big written one down to the small little visual. And then exactly a week after having this virtual book launch with 52 military veterans from all over the world and #1 Amazon bestseller status in the military families category, I got a call that my father had stage 4 lung cancer, and we had days, weeks, a month if we're lucky. So literally 6 days later, during a pandemic, I flew to Colorado to say bye to my dad. We had 4 hours with him, and he died 12 hours after we landed. So needless to say, this didn't happen. So what's next is I'm trying to do the November book launch now in April, and getting some help with reaching out to podcasts and stuff. What's important to me, and I just love how Martha said it, why did I write this book? And I wanted to answer the process question. Every book has a different process, but the way I did this one is I've been teaching authentic personal branding for student veterans and their spouses at universities for 9 years. So I had workshops, which became an online class called Authentic Personal Branding for Military Veterans and Spouses. If you know any military people transitioning or getting out, I had the whole thing just transcribed using rev.com. So process, if you've already got written stuff or spoken stuff, have it transcribed. And then it became the manuscript to the book. And then I hired a military veteran developmental editor who put subheadings and made it beautiful. And we got that book done like that. So what's next is continuing the launch. Creating the 3rd book in the children's book series. My illustrators got 90% of the art done. And we want to launch that by November for Veterans Day. Might be a bit too aggressive because of the illustrations. But in addition to that, like Linda said, I'm always writing more books. And because of my father's death, I've really started to now write kind of a memoir book that, oh, where's your memoir? I'm like, I like writing about other people. Right. So I might get around to doing that. It's in progress, but I like teaching through literature. I like teaching, and I like getting results. I want to just share a quote from Raul Zarate. He is a veteran whose personal brand I featured in the book. So again, I write about process, and I feature the branding that the veterans make, right? And so he wrote to me and he said, Graciela, I got the job with Intel, my dream company. And I read exactly how to describe myself when they asked that question, and they loved it. You can't land your dream company without the personal branding stuff that you teach to us veterans. And for me, that's what's next, is to keep doing that. And I get paid by the seat, by the person, by the workshop, to do virtual and in-person workshops. The book, then they buy like 100 or 200 because all the students need it as a reference, right? So I think what I want you guys to take away, the students especially, is your book is an idea, which launches other classes, workshops, other revenue streams. It's never just about the book. Okay. It could also be the other way. You create the class first, like I did, and then you get a book. So think of the bigger picture, the idea that you want out of the world. But all of those things are next.
Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today and for sharing your stories with all of us. And I really appreciate just all the knowledge that you all had to share. And if I could summarize, what all of you said, and maybe some takeaways that really stood out to me were the importance of writing our own stories about ourselves, our community, and not having other people misrepresent ourselves, because we can touch future generations, and other people, women of color, BIPOC folks, and there's a lot of power to that. So thank you very much. And for our next segment, we'll go on to the Q&A portion. And I know Lily will be facilitating that section. And if for folks that dropped a few questions in the chat box, if you feel comfortable unmuting yourselves and sharing that, please do so. But I'll pass it on to Lily.
Thank you, Elisa, and thank you again to Graciela, Linda, and Marta. So our first question here that came into the chat a few minutes ago is for Marta, which asks, what feedback have people shared with you about your book?
Thank you. And I think that was Ovi. He's the one that actually he read my Nopalera from the Nopalera CEO and Facebook, and he sent me this message on Messenger, and he's like, I just stayed up reading your story, and I've cried, I've laughed, I've been inspired, I'm angry, all the emotions. He's like, you need to write a book, you need to put this out there. So the feedback is usually that, oh my God, it's so funny, or you say things that are so deep and so critical, and yet I still can relate, and I've been through that, right? And if you can, I can. So I've heard it's inspiring, but there's so many other stories here of Latina women who've done incredible work, that I recommend you also read them, because it's worth your time, and it's worth that spark of inspiration.
Muchas gracias, Marta. The next question that came in is for Linda. Linda, was it difficult to put the story of your family out there? How did your family react to the book?
Yeah, that's a big question. I always say, because I do workshops on this, is that you cannot think about anybody else when you write the book, or you will be automatically editing yourself. There's plenty of time later to worry about la familia and everything else, but you cannot stop your creative process and your purpose and what you need to do. So I really just wrote it from my perspective clearly, in terms of what happened to me and my passion. One of the best things that Marcela Landres, who was the editorial consultant I mentioned earlier, said to me is, from the first book, she goes, you know what, we need to hear from everybody else more. So I stopped and I started doing interviews with some of my siblings, and with a woman who grew up with my family. And I integrated what they thought into the book, which I actually really loved, because it gave it a bigger flavor and it gave a bigger sense of that. So I think we talked a lot about that the things we think are shameful are just life. It's the reality of having to go down bumpy roads, and we often inherit things that are not ours. And our job is to decide what that baggage is not ours, and bless it and let it go. So give room for the growth and the joy that our lives can give us. In terms of how people reacted, my family in the US, not so much. They have not come to me to talk about the book, interestingly enough. My siblings in Mexico, well, I had one, I went down there. Unfortunately, my brother, who's a big part of the book, passed away right before it was published, and I was planning to go to Mexico and read the book with him. But I did sit and I translated it into Spanish for my oldest sister. And, she loved it. Remember, even though they were, you don't know, but anyways, because they're the invisible family in my life, that for them to be visible was such a big deal. And I think that, I hope in the future to have conversations. I did give it to my twins. And my son's reaction was, wow, I didn't know our family was so complicated. I was like, I think it's going to take a while for my family, but I do know that the people who have read parts of it have been healed and have gotten a different perspective. And like I said, for me, it was really for my children more than anybody. And so, they appreciated the book, and that's what matters to me.
Thank you so much, Linda. I know I could only imagine how complex that was. And so it sounds like you navigated it the best you could, and understanding that, remembering your purpose and who it was meant for. So gracias. And at this time, I'm going to invite any members of our audience, if you'd like to unmute yourselves, and if you feel comfortable sharing your camera, enabling your camera, please, if you have any questions, I invite you to go ahead and share out.
I guess, hi, I'm Claudia. Hi, Linda. And I think I've met Graciela. I think we met once at an event. You look so familiar. Of course, you're very famous now, but
You look familiar too. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Anyways, a side conversation, but it's just great to hear all of your stories. Thank you for sharing, and all three of you. So I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you, and I'll definitely would like to connect with some of you. I'm an author too, but in my early stages of my new career.
Yay. Keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claudia. Well, we are a little over time, so I just want to thank all of our amazing authors for joining us this afternoon. We hope this is not the last time that we see you and that we share in community space with you all. And thank you again for the transformative work that each of you are doing and the amazing gifts that you're leaving behind for the next generation to come. So mil gracias. I am going to just share my screen real quickly to invite all of you, if you are interested in following the work that's being done here at the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center. We have our link tree, and a majority of our events and programs right now, especially because we are in a virtual format, are open to the community. So definitely check out some of our work. This session today and this event will be posted on our Centro YouTube channel, which again, you can find on our link tree. And I want to actually invite también Linda to come tell us a little bit more about Modern Latina and how you could be engaged, especially with the book club.
Yes, thank you, Lily. So thank you again for such an amazing event. This is what Modern Latina Book Club is about. It's about supporting our Latinx authors and elevating their stories. If you would like to follow and learn more about the Modern Latina Book Club, we have a Facebook group that you can join. And then we do work together to select books that we read on a bi-monthly basis so that we are supporting our Latinx authors. So I hope you can join. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And again, muchas gracias for everybody who joined us. And we will be sending out a PDF with, I know folks were asking about the books and the list of the books and contact information for the authors. We will be collecting that in the next couple of days and sharing that information with you all today so that we can all stay in touch. So mil gracias for joining us. We hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Gracias.
Thank you, everybody.